Hi, my name's Phil. I like to come out politics. So last year, during the US election campaign, Trump tried to claim that Haitians were eating cats and dogs. It wasn't true, of course, but the truth and Donald Trump have been ignoring one another for years. But it was a very good campaign trick for Trump. So good that Farage may well be trying his own version out in the UK. But instead of accusing people of eating beloved pets, he's hinting at migrants eating our swans. The authorities immediately called it out as nonsense. But let's look at why Farage might be making the claim that foreigners are coming over here and taking our swans. Because with Farage, there's always a method behind the racist madness. But first, for daily news and politics, please click the subscribe button to stay notified. So this began when Nigel Farage welched on a bet with Nick Ferrari yesterday. Ferrari had earlier challenged Farage about Trump's claims that Haitians were eating cats and dogs during his election campaign last year, and they bet a tenner it wasn't true. Farage thought it had some truth in it, or so he said. Yesterday, Ferrari wanted to collect on his bet, and Farage refused, saying Ferrari had to prove that it categorically wasn't true. Which is backwards logic. If someone makes a claim, it's on the burden of proof is on them. The burden of proof is not on someone else to prove it's not true. But anyway, Farage then went on, tongue in cheek, I hope, to talk about migrants eating swans in this country. Now, being clear, this is also untrue, and the royal parks have debunked the claim. But don't be surprised if this isn't the last time you hear of it. Farage may well be testing the waters to see if he can replicate Trump's success with these outlandish claims. Yes, that is right. It's time to take another look at how political campaigning takes advantage of our lizard brains in order to win power. Because understanding how Trump actually made his obviously fake claim about eating dogs work for his election, which it did, gives us an insight into why Farage might wish to replicate the same con trick. And forewarned is forearmed. So populist politicians don't just float trial balloons, they launch trial unicorns. So you're talking about something so utterly bizarre, so fundamentally unbelievable, that you have to repeat it. Think about it. So, migrants ate the king's swans, or Haitian neighbours barbecue fluffy. The real trick here isn't to cause a scandal as such, it's to catapult the narrative into the theatre of the absurd. Neuroscience has a name for this, a disfluency bump. Your brain stumbles over the sheer weirdness of the claim. It's so far out there that your cognitive processors hit a snag. And then what happens when your brain stumbles? It tags the story as important, precisely because it's weird. That little bump, that moment of cognitive dissonance, essentially grants the lie free prime real estate on the front page, in your newsfeed, and in your brain. The goal isn't to be believable. Nigel Farage didn't even try and insist it was true when he said it yesterday. He just said, well, I think it's true. Someone said so. Trump did the same thing. He didn't insist it was true. He said, well, I've seen reports, right? The goal here isn't to be believable or believed. It's to be unforgettable. It creates a vacuum of disbelief that begs to be filled. And then very often that vacuum is filled by repetition and outrage, not facts. You see the same thing on social media as well, of course. Utterly insane claims that can't possibly be real, as one going around within MAGA circles today, I may talk about later. But they get the clicks. And these claims are mimetic, right? They're easily shared, hard to dismiss because of its shock value. Listen to Farage's excuses for welching on his bet. Ferrari had to categorically prove that no Haitian had ever eaten a cat or dog. Farage, just like Trump, makes obviously untrue claims and then insists that you have to prove the negative rather than them having to prove the positive, which is completely backwards to intelligent logic. But these outlandish lies aren't just silly. They're designed to poke at a raw nerve deep within us. Beneath the absurdity, there's always a powerful emotional anchor. Think about it. In America, pets often represent safety, companionship. They're part of your family, the sanctity of your homes, right? Swans, especially in Britain, symbolise like heritage, national identity, cultural pride. We all know, for example, you're not allowed to kill and eat swans because they all belong to the crown, like whales. The mammals, not the country. If a politician or their proxies can successfully graft the image of an outsider onto that primal fear, whether it's the loss of home, the erosion of cultural identity, or a threat to our safety or heritage, the joke quickly morphs into a real threat. Psychologists call it availability bias. If you can vividly picture something, no matter how improbable, your brain tends to perceive it as more likely and therefore more frightening. These fear appeals are powerful because they trigger an automatic, very often unconscious emotional response that bypasses rational deliberation. And then when you add constant repetition, because something like this gets shared around, like I'm talking about, it's been talked about widely. So your amygdala, that almond-shaped part of your brain responsible for processing emotions, your lizard brain, especially fear, that does the rest of the work. Cortisol spikes, your body's stress response kicks in. Your frontal cortex, the deep thought part of the brain, the responsible part for critical thinking, effectively gets bypassed. The voter starts asking, well, what if it's true? Once that question takes root, even for a moment, the lie's done its job. It's about making exaggerated threats feel plausible and imminent and widely shared. Now, here's where the formula turns into political gold dust. So, when fact checkers, journalists, or the authorities, in this case, the royal parks, debunk the outlandish claim, what happens then? The politician who made the claim, what do? They just shrug or double down with a dismissive. I saw reports, I'm just asking questions, right? What's wrong with that? Have you heard that one before? But to their supporters, it sounds very different. What they hear is, oh, he's one of us. The elite media hate him because he speaks uncomfortable truths. They're trying to shut this down. Why are they trying to shut it down? Why are they going to so many lengths to shut this down? What's really the problem? Because to them, it just sounded like something a bit silly, right? But then if the mainstream media are really trying to shut it down because they see the real danger, then they're thinking, why are they going so far to shut this down? What's going on? Sharing that initial outrageous story then becomes a membership badge, a sign of loyalty to the in-group. It signals that you're in the know, you're savvy enough to see through the so-called mainstream narrative. And there's backup for this. There was some research done in the US in 2022 based on the midterm data, and they found that the very act of debunking can actually widen this sort of loyalty gap by as much as 12 points amongst highly partisan voters. Why? Because being told that your beliefs are wrong by an out group can trigger a defensive reaction, strengthens your attachment to your own group and its shared narrative. It's insane. It makes tackling disinformation incredibly difficult. If you debunk the claim, there's scientific research that suggests you can actually just make the disinformation worse. If you don't debunk it, the claim can proceed uncontested. Our brains are basically working against us here, the blobby grey traitors. And the crazier the headline, the purer the badge of loyalty. Rational rebuttal isn't seen as a correction. It's interpreted as persecution. And persecution in turn fuels solidarity. It reinforces the idea that they are against us. And the only way to fight back is to stick together and amplify the original message, regardless of how believable it is. It's a tribal psychology that ensures that the lie, once it's planted, is incredibly resilient. Donald Trump, Ohio, September 2024, he claimed they're eating the dogs, the cats, instantly generated global coverage. We all know about it. It got over 23 million TikTok views in like a couple of days. It was followed by a noticeable polling bump amongst suburban women, a demographic often concerned about crime and community safety. Days later, you had city officials in Springfield, Ohio, confirming there were 0 pet eating incidents, no credible reports or evidence, but the polling bump held firm. Trump later stood by his claims, framing them as simply, I'm just saying what was reported. Even he's not claiming it's true. He's just saying he's heard a thing, and apparently it's up to the rest of us to prove it's categorically not true. The tactic, often described as unrelenting lies, creates a dangerous and false narrative that has real-world consequences, including bomb threats to public institutions for trying to shut down the information, right? So then you come over to this side of the Atlantic. Nigel Farage yesterday suggests that Eastern Europeans are taking swans from the royal parks and eating them. The claim is immediately debunked by the royal parks. They issued a statement confirming there's absolutely no reports or evidence of swans being harmed or even taken. We're not missing any swans, mate. Farage, however, suggested the claim was plausible based on cultural stereotypes. If you challenge it, Farage ends up looking more plausible to his supporters who think he's exposing something the establishment wants to cover up. Again, we go back to that 2022 study in the United States. The act of debunking can actually work to reinforce the disinformation. So there are times when it's best to ignore it. Problem is knowing when you need to ignore it and when you need to debunk it. How to do it in such a way which doesn't generate stubbornness amongst that group of people. So why does the formula keep winning? Well, it boils down to a simple equation. Moderate fear plus a simple solution equals turnout. Too little fear and there's no urgency for voters. Too much and people might shut down, engaging in defensive avoidance, right? Disengage from the message entirely. The sweet spot is a headline that has to be so absurd that it gets fixed in your head. It compels you to share it because it's so absurd. I mean, do a little thought experiment. So let's say I had no scruples, but also had millions of pounds to defend myself against defamation, right? And I wanted to make up a rumour about a political opponent to be malicious. Would I make up something about dodgy tax affairs? No, apart from the fact most of the political figures I disapprove of are known to have dodgy tax affairs. It's not actually out of the ordinary. It's not going to stick in people's heads. Oh, another politician with dodgy tax affairs. News at 10. Same with adultery or any of the usual things, any of the things that used to cause scandals decades ago. It would need to be an original sin of sorts. Like, oh, I heard Lord Reginald Dungleberry is rumoured to have been disemboweling live hedgehogs and painting his fences with their fresh blood. Something you've never heard of, shocking, you can picture it, and sticks in your head. This is why the eating dogs works. It's not something you hear about. Same with nicking swans. It's not just unusual, it's unheard of. Helps it stick in the mind. And if questioned, I would just say, I didn't see it myself. I just there's some people saying it, right? There's some people saying they saw it. And I never said it was definitively true. I'm just asking questions. But of course, what would be wrong with that one is I'd be trying to ascribe the malicious rumour against a person who could sue me. Whereas if I did it against a group of people, and I didn't say all of them, just some of them, then it's difficult to say who I'm defaming, right? Slandering. It's difficult to say, so no one can really sue me. And that's what they do. Donald Trump didn't do it about, although he has done it about people. He doesn't do it about a person. He does it about a group. Nigel Farage, same thing. It's a group. It's like no one can come up and say, oh, you're telling lies about me. No, not you, but sometimes people where you come from. Do you know how it works? Social media platforms are practically built to reward this cocktail of emotions as well. The algorithms prioritize engagement, meaning content that sparks strong reactions like outrage, disbelief and fear gets the reach, pushes it to wider audience. Mainstream media often chases the clicks and views, then it inevitably follows the traffic. One outrageous tweet can quickly become like a main news segment, which then morphs into a fundraising email. Before you know it, votes, especially in low turnout local elections in this country or primaries in America, where a few point swing can be a landslide. This strategic use of fear appeals as it's been a consistent feature in political campaigns, particularly amongst extreme right-wing candidates who often employ negative character attacking rhetoric to create an atmosphere of loathing. It is a tried and tested strategy because, as history shows, it mobilizes people to act. The good news is that recognition can defang the bite of these tactics. When the next outlandish story drops, you can it could be squirrels, it could be goldfish, who knows, doesn't matter. You can analyze it. Ask yourself 3 questions, right? First, does it sound like a cartoon? That's your disfluency bump. It's so weird, so over the top, your brain stumbles on it. Remember, the goal isn't believability, it's memorability. Second, does it point to one specific group as dangerous, alien, or a threat to something you hold dear? That's the emotional core, taps into your primal fears about safety, heritage, or identity. It's about creating a clear enemy and a simple solution. Vote for the person promising to kick them out of the country or something. Third, are supporters waving it around as proof the media or elites are lying and trying to silence the truth tellers? That's your in-group signal. Reinforces tribal loyalty, turns debunking into a badge of honour. And if you can tick all 3 of those boxes, you can spot the pattern and you can call it by name. It's like the swan, dog, cat formula thing. The key is to mock the tactic, I think, not necessarily the people who believe it. And why? Because mocking the tactic robs the lie of its power, while mocking believers often pushes them further into the in-group, cements their loyalty. So you can't let the people who've been conned feel foolish. You just have to ridicule the lie. It's about creating critical distance. A bit like seeing how a magic trick works. Once you know the mechanism, it loses its power to deceive. The downside is only so many people are going to watch this video. Only so many people are going to disbelieve the outlandish claim without proof. in our post-truth era especially, ridiculously over-the-top lies are readily believed if the person telling them is in their in-group. Because outlandish claims are very clickable and shareable as well, they're also everywhere. Thanks to our lizard brains, hooray! This form of disinformation can have very real consequences. But let me know what you think in the comments below. For more content, you could subscribe to the channel or even join for access to streams of behind the scenes updates. Thanks for watching, and until next time, I'll see you later.